Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm Gilles Galanta and joined by Evan Abrams each and every week. He's our research director here at the Action Network. We're going to dive into all of the Sunday NFL action for Week 10. Brandon Anderson will have his hot reads later in the show. And, of course, Patrick Everson from Vegas Insider. He's going to give us an update on the sportsbooks in Vegas, how they fared this NFL Sunday. But, Evan, first, let's talk Monday Night Football. Broncos, Bills. It's got to be better than whatever Sunday Night Football we're showing right now with Raiders, Jets. Bills are 7-point home favorites with a total at 46.5. Now, I want to talk about this game, Evan, because I'm not sure why the spread is what it is. And I wanted to talk it out with you because the Bills haven't covered a spread in 5 straight games. They're 3-2 straight up in their last 5, but they're 0-5 against the spread. And the eye test, at least from what we've seen from the Bills, and along with the statistics, I'm not sure if the Bills should be really laying 7 right now against the Broncos in this spot. Like, their pass defense and secondary has not been good. And on offense, they've really stalled. We talked about this every week. In their last 5 games, they only have 4 touchdowns in the first halves. So combined in 5 games. So there's no fast starts. There's no explosive over-the-top plays that we're used to seeing. So for me, I find when you have a pass defense that's this weak, it makes me nervous on the late cover. And that's what I always just kind of worry about is this Broncos team. You know, maybe they're finally getting it together. How are you looking at this game? Do you want to pick a side or a total in this? My instinct says to take the Broncos, but then you remember you're taking the Broncos in this spot, and it's hard to just overlook that.
I actually have a lot to say about this game. I feel like I've been screaming a lot earlier this week about feeling like this line was wrong. More so just the 7.5 being inaccurate. Now that we're down to 7, I'd say I'd probably make the game around 6.5 area, just based off of. I mean, these teams literally completely opposites of what we know them to be, at least earlier in the year. Like if you look at, especially on the defensive side, Buffalo completely different, and Denver's flipped as well. Denver looks pretty decent, and I will throw out this trend: unders 10-1 on Monday Night Football, unders 55, 28-1 on Monday Night Football since 2019, and we're sitting here watching Sunday Night Football with another primetime under, kind of under wraps here. So to me, I thought Denver at 7.5 was interesting. It's hard not to like another under. Now you're about 47.5 with Denver Buffalo, so that would be
Right.
That would be your total. I think from a touchdown point of view, I listen, liking Denver in the game. I think Denver's players are a bit mispriced. So Javonte at like 14-1 first touchdown or something like that. Like the top 4 players are all Bills, right?
Yep,
so if you like someone, Denver. So yeah.
No, I think this is a solid look of it. And part of the thing too with this Broncos team is it's kind of trick or treat. You don't know really what team we're going to get. Are we getting this team that gave up 31 to the Jets, who can't score a touchdown against the Raiders, or 70 to the Dolphins, or is it the one that held the Chiefs to 27 points in 2 games, right? Like, and now they're coming off this bye. They're facing a team where the Bills' DVOA and pass defense just continues to drop every week. A lot of injuries on that front. So I'm with you on a touchdown score perspective. I feel like Cortland Sutton is completely mispriced. He has touchdowns in 6 of 8 games this year. He leads the team in red zone targets. And as I said, like the Bills, they're 28th in DVOA versus wide receiver 1. So if the Broncos are trailing late, I like Sutton's chances to score. And it's the same reason kind of why I like the Broncos to cover in this spot, because I don't trust the Bills to either start off strong or to finish strong. And this is what's gone a counterculture of the Bills, because historically, when the Bills win, they win big. Like 75% of, or close to 75% of all of Josh Allen's wins are by 7 points or more. So usually when they roll big, but we have not seen that over the last 5 games. But I will say, from a Bills offensive touchdown perspective, I do like Gabe Davis. I am seeing him out there right now. His prices are all over the place. I've seen plus 130. I've seen plus 230, but leads the team in ADOT, and this Broncos team, even if you include the last three games, their pass defense has been horrendous all year. They rank last in DVOA overall. They're last versus wide receiver 2. So Gabe Davis, especially if Patrick Surtain and Simmons, maybe they're rotating more to try to stop Stephon Diggs, I think Gabe Davis would be the guy that I would look at around plus 230 if you can get that. Same thing as Cortland Sutton, also at plus 240. All right, so that's Monday Night Football. Evan, let's move over to Sunday now. 5 games this week, Evan, with totals under 40, and 4 of them went over. So overs were 8-3 today, 8-4 for the week. Favorites 7-4 straight up, and 6-5 against the spread today. What was some of the big trends that you saw today, Evan? What was the biggest thing that stood out for you?
Favorites continuing to roll 32-10. Straight up since week 8. So over the last 3 weeks, it's been hard to find a underdog money line in either your straight up wagers or your parlays. 32-10 for favorites. Home teams over 500 now in the last 6 weeks straight up. So they've been, kind of keeping up there. And overs, like you mentioned, 8-3, 8-4, 4-0 in the afternoon. Looking like Sunday Night Football probably going to stay under. But right now, unders entering Sunday Night Football, 87, 60, and 1 for the season. So still doing pretty well.
And it's surprising too with how the favorites went, because this week there's 4 teams on bye, 2 of them that are always favored in every game. The Eagles and the Chiefs. Dolphins have been favored in most of their games as well. So there's 3 teams right off the bat that are very public sides that weren't available to bet. So I found that really interesting. 8 of the games today, if you include the Germany game, were all 1-score games too. So a lot of drama all the way to the end. And one of those games, I think, Evan, that we got to start off with is Browns-Ravens, because this was really, really fun. Very counter to what AFC North football is too. Usually it's a grinded out kind of game, but the Browns win 33-31. Ravens, 6.5-point home favorites, do not cover or win, and the total goes way over at 37.5. This was one of the lowest totals of the day too, Evan, and this is the 3rd Ravens game with a total below 40 this year. They're now 1-2 straight up in those games. And one thing that I find very interesting as well, because we could talk about this game a little bit more, but I'm already looking ahead. And Lamar Jackson in his career is 3-9 against the spread at home versus the AFC North. And they're hosting the Bengals here coming up on Thursday Night Football as 3.5-point favorites.
I don't know. The whole, and this is where it gets tricky, right? ATS marks remembering a quarterback for doing certain things, especially when you're sitting here. Like, the Ravens had that game wrapped up. They really should have covered that game.
I thought.
It's so crazy to watch the comeback and see everything that happened after they had the lead. Here's a stat I did look up because I was curious, and I think it is something that probably will continue. AFC North divisional games in general. Underdogs, 69, 46-3 in the last decade. 500 or better against the spread in 9 of the last 10 years. So maybe it's just the rule. And on the favorites, Chad and Simon kind of make rules for different quarterbacks and make rules for, different. In my opinion, the rule here might just be take underdogs in this division.
Every time.
Like, in this division game, you're probably going to end up 55, 60% at the end of the year. Just crazy. And obviously, Browns get the win. Steelers get the win. Obviously, Bengals come up short, but crazy.
Yeah, and now the AFC North, that was the one thing talking about how close these teams are and how close these games tend to be. Ravens are 7-3. 2 of those losses are to the Steelers and now the Browns today, and then that Colts game that was just wild with Gardner Minshew. So, and then the Steelers right behind them at 6-3. The Browns now at 6-3, and then the Bengals last in the division at 5-5. Like, that's what's crazy right now, is that all 4 teams could potentially make the playoffs. And one thing I found crazy about this game too, Evan, is that if you were looking at the under in this game, you had to have been very nervous pretty much from the second play of the game, because there was a defensive touchdown on the second play. Deshaun Watson, I was very worried about how this game was going to go, because you thought, okay, the under's cooked. The Browns and Watson, they're going to get rolled. This is going to be like the Seahawks game and the Lions game that we saw where they're just getting beaten by 30 points. And the Ravens, their run game at times will look unstoppable. Like they've got that early long touchdown from Keaton Mitchell. They get another from Gus. But where this game came down to was really third down, and specifically how the Browns performed on third down. Offensively, they were 8 for 16 on third down. And on defense, they held the Ravens to 2 for 8 on third down. And, Deshaun Watson, he was 6 for 20 passing with 79 yards at halftime. At the end of the game, he finished, or in the second half, let's just talk about the second half. He was 14 for 14 throwing the ball, having 135 yards passing, touchdown, 25 yards rushing, probably the best game that we've ever seen Deshaun Watson play in a Browns uniform.
That was actually the note that I made. 14 of 14 second half was absolutely
It was incredible.
Just incredible. And the thing that's funny is, and maybe this is just a part of, they used PJ Walker for the Hail Mary before the half. PJ Walker came in to throw, I believe, a few other passes. It's just interesting how, the dynamic there is also about the fact that Walker is a part of, some things that they execute in the offense. Obviously, Deshaun's a starter, but kind of interesting how that works out. Baltimore also 8-0-2 first quarter money line this year. That extended today. So great early starters, as they did have the lead and they blew it in this one. But also, Browns win the game. Browns won the game, but never led. So hard to hear.
And they were down 30-17 in the fourth quarter, man. And then they get that passing touchdown, and then you see the pass go up in the air from Lamar Jackson, and it goes to the pick six. And you knew that 14-point swing in less than a minute in that game. So it reminded me of that Steelers game when the Ravens were playing with the Steelers, just inexplicably had no business winning that game and then come back and win that. So we're going to talk more about the AFC North as we go. And I think we got to start right now with Texans Bengals, because the Texans win 30-27. CJ Stroud leads another miraculous comeback. And I mean, he won the game, nearly lost it, and then won it again, which was really fun the way that it went. But now the Texans and CJ Stroud are now 4-2 straight up and 5-1 against the spread as an underdog this season.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this game and this line is the entire week leading up, right? Because if you think about the roller coaster of the injuries, when you had no T. Higgins, and then all of a sudden Nico Collins, you get that news where he's not going to play this weekend. And so you're trying to figure out, like what pieces are going to be in this game. And then all of a sudden you get to Sunday, you look at the line. I believe the line did close about 6.5, which all week you're saying to yourself, well, it's not 7 for a reason, right? Like, if it got to 7, they'd have more faith in the Bengals, and turned out to be right. Some crazy stats with CJ Stroud. I mean, we've been kind of going over it all season, the passing touchdowns, the interceptions. But here's a fun one that I dug up. So obviously now the Texans are 5-4 this year, which makes Stroud 5-4 straight up. So that's the most wins for Houston since 2019, obviously with 4 wins or less each of the last four seasons. 3 seasons.
It's been pretty bad.
2020. And not even that, but tied. So obviously he was drafted from Ohio State. So he ties the NFL single season wins record for a drafted Ohio State Buckeye with 5 wins.
Go Buckeyes. The CJ Stroud breaks the record. That's amazing. Crazy. Well, and he was just completing passes at will today. Like 25-yard passes were just no problem for him. Tank Dell was all over the field today. The Bengals came out strong. They get that early touchdown, but you could see as the game was going on, it wasn't about Higgins and it wasn't about Jamar Chase being compromised. They had just no run game. The Texans really held them in check. Now, Mixon, he did end up scoring that touchdown, but he only had 46 yards rushing. Joe Burrow was second with 20. That can't happen for the Bengals to win. And looking at these upcoming schedules, Texans might be in the driver's seat in this AFC South. We'll talk about the Jaguars 49ers game here coming up, but the Texans, they've got the Cardinals coming up, who did win today, which is hilarious in Kyler Murray's return. But the Texans, they got the Cardinals, the Jaguars, the Broncos, and the Jets over the next 4 games. They've only got 2 games versus teams who are above 500 for the rest of the year in the Jaguars and the Browns. But then you look on this Bengals side, it's a tale of two teams. The Bengals, they've got the Ravens, the Steelers, the Jags, the Colts, and they've still got the Chiefs in week 17. So it's going to be a tough road for them at 5-5 just to make the playoffs, whereas the Texans now are kind of in the driver's seat either to get the AFC South title or at least make a wild card in the AFC.
I was just going to say that Jags got a loss today. Like, not only did the Texans find themselves a win, but Jags got a loss, which, 6-3, you're a game back. So, our colleague Brandon Anderson has been talking about it for a long time. But
he's on Texans Island.
Texans Island is just it's crazy. And I think today, and I took them +7 when it flashed earlier in the week.
Sure.
I liked Houston in this spot. It's a good game. And now you just mentioned it. I had a huge circle on my notes today. 3 straight home games coming up for them. And the opponents, aren't the most difficult teams. I believe Jacksonville's on that list, but all winnable games. So maybe they get a little healthier, and it's going to be interesting and dangerous. D'Amico.
Yeah, and one team, so the Texans are pretty dangerous here in the AFC, so it should be interesting to see if CJ Stroud can lead them to the playoffs. But when we position ourselves over to the NFC, the new dangerous team, in my opinion, is the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings beat the Saints today 27-19, and they win outright as a home dog. Saints were 3-point favorites. Total goes over a 40.5, but again, it's the Vikings, so it's going to be a 1-score game. You knew that was coming. So, but I said this to you off air. Maybe I'm biased, but Josh Dobbs to me is the best story in football because he is set up to fail at pretty much every stop. When he played for the Titans last year, it was in a spot start without Ryan Tannehill. Then he comes in this year. They basically trade away every single skill position player other than James Conner and Marquise Brown, and they still are covering early and covering for spread bettors earlier. And then now they get up by 3 scores at halftime. He's got 268 passing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. And then what was almost hilarious about this game too, Evan, is not only just the Josh Dobbs narrative and just the feel-good aspect of the underdog, but then you get the true underdog, the Jameis Winston experience in the second half with Derek Carr getting hurt because you think, okay, here's the Saints, Derek Carr goes down. They got to go to Taysom Hill, right? Nope. We're going full Jameis Winston experience here, and we get an immediate touchdown to Chris Olave to cut the lead to 16. Then we get another touchdown to cut it to 8. But, of course, as this game goes, you know that Jameis Winston, the longer that he is in the game, turnovers are going to happen. So there were 2 interceptions to close out the game. And, I mean, the man loves his go routes. What can I say?
This game legitimately has unlimited things to unpack. There's so many different angles and storylines. Jameis Winston, 2 interceptions and 2 touchdowns feels like every single time he comes on the field. Like when I looked at the box score and I said to myself, all right, I watched the game, but like, let me get a refresher on what happened here. And you see that, you say, oh, well, that happens every time. But when you look at Minnesota specifically, flipping the page there, Dobbs is the story, right? When you think about the last few weeks, you say to yourself, well, what comes out of the NFL? What am I thinking about? What are people talking about? Kind of is Minnesota, because Minnesota started off awful. Now they've won. What have they won? 5 in a row? Is that right?
5 in a row. 5-4.
Yeah. And now, they're 6-4 in this season. That's why I just looked at the standings. 6-4 on the season.
Mm-hmm.
They're a game and a half back at Detroit. Now, I don't know if they're going to catch Detroit, but I don't necessarily think that's what they're going after. I think if they snuck into a playoff spot, they got into the wild card.
It's a win. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very crazy they're even in this position. And doing it without Justin Jefferson, may I say.
Who's coming back next week, probably.
Yeah, and if you look at the schedule, at Denver Sunday Night Football, so maybe they do get him back for that. And then you got a little Minnesota primetime coming up. So you have at Denver Sunday Night Football versus Chicago Monday Night Football, then a bye. So you're going to get a little Josh Dobbs in your life in primetime coming up. But I'll say from Minnesota's perspective, they deserve the game. Pass rush, fewer turnovers, fewer penalties, better yards per play. They just deserve the win today. They played better. So, I mean, we could talk about a few things on the New Orleans side. which
Well, that's what I was going to talk to you
yeah,
about. I was going to ask you about the NFC South, because now the Saints are 5-5, the Bucks are 4-5, and then you've got the Falcons who are 5-5. We're not going to talk about the Panthers at this stage, but I can't pick between these three teams of who I think would win this division. Now, obviously, I think on paper, I think the Saints are the most talented team. But if you have Derek Carr, a quarterback, I can't trust you in the red zone. And I think the Bucks are just a little bit. I don't know if they have enough talent to be able to overcome the Saints if it was to go head to head, even though they did beat the hell out of them earlier this year. And then the Falcons, they just can't get out of their own way. We'll talk about Falcons Cardinals here in a second. But your guess is as good as mine, dude. Like, who's going to win the AFC South at this stage? Because they all stink.
When I make these division bets, I usually try to anoint someone sometimes based off coaching. And when you think about it, between Dennis Allen, Todd Bowles, and Arthur Smith, I'm just it's the dumb meme dragon, but all of them are the dumb one.
We're going to take a little break here. We'll talk about some more games here in a second. But now it's time for the hot read from our own Brandon Anderson. Brandon, what do you have us looking for early Week 11 lines?
All right, Week 11 hot read. We went 1-1 this week. We got CLV on both our picks. Seattle defense let us down late. Hot read is now 12-6 on the season, 67% hit rate. This is today, I believe, the grossest, the nastiest hot read of the season. Now, if you listen on Friday to this podcast, if you were at the look ahead, you're going to be familiar with both of these games. So I'm going to start out with Steelers-Browns. We grabbed Pittsburgh on the look-ahead, +5. Classic rah-rah Tomlin underdog spot in the division. It's already down to 3.5. I still like it, but that's not the pick here. Going to the same game, we're going to get uglier. Give me the under, 38.5, Steelers-Browns. Part of the reason we like that +5 was the low total, so let's get the under too. Who's going to score in this game? We got on one side Deshaun Watson, who, he flashed a little bit today. He got into the end zone. He mostly made plays with his legs, if we're being honest. But no tackles on that team right now. They're all banged up. Obviously, no Nick Chubb. It's not a lot of offense. Is Matt Canada's offense going to score on this Browns defense? They're number one DVOA, number one against the pass, number one against the run. They just held Lamar Jackson, who was on everybody's midseason MVP pick this week. Held him to 0.02 EPA per play, basically zero. They got a pick six on him. They held the Ravens to 2 third-down conversions the entire game. This Browns defense is legit. So is the Steelers, right? We know the Steelers defense is always good. Not quite as good as the Browns, obviously, but they're great against the pass. They're okay against the run. I think TJ Watt and all those pass rushers against the bad line, missing those tackles, missing those guys to protect the edge. Good interior, but not on the edge. I think they're going to get after Deshaun Watson. I just don't see a lot of points coming in this game. That's part of why we like the Steelers here as well. Pittsburgh games this season, averaging 37.6 points a game. All but 2 Pittsburgh games are at 42 or below. Browns games are a little higher, 42.9, but we had 66 points today. We had a 39-38 Indianapolis game a few weeks ago with the Browns. If you exclude those two outliers, because let's be honest, we're not getting 39-38 here. Outside of those two games, Browns games are at 34.7 points a game. So this line, 38.5, still a little too high. I think it's going to start dropping a little bit. Steelers, 7-2 to the under so far this season. Mike Tomlin rode unders. Historically, the most profitable coach for road unders in our system at Action Network. 77-54-1 to the under, 59%. You've heard this from me before, Deshaun Watson and Kevin Stefanski, when the total is below 44, which obviously it is here. 59% to the under for Stefanski, 58% for Watson, and I think it keeps moving down. It is up a half point since open, but I think it's going to go back the other way. If it does get to 38 or below unders this season at 38 or under, 10-2-1 entering Sunday Night Football. Gets to 37, that's a key number. We want to grab it before that. 37 or below, the under is 79% the last 4 years. So it's playing the trends, playing the defense, some ugly football. Steelers, Browns, under 38.5. But I got to tell you, if you thought that was ugly, here we go. Give me the New York Football Giants, +10 at the Commanders. I warned you. I warned you on the look ahead. I warned you this was coming. It's going to get ugly. I'm sorry. 10 points is just too many. The total for this game is 37. 10 out of 37 is so many points to give us. These teams just played 3 weeks ago, and the Giants won. They won 14-7, and they are now 10-point underdogs. And I know what you're going to say, Daniel Jones. No Daniel Jones in that game. It was Tyrod Taylor. I don't know who we're going to get here. Tommy DeVito. We might get Danny DeVito. We might get Matt Barkley coming in at quarterback. I don't really care. 10 points is too many. What has Washington done to earn a 10-point advantage against any team? I think Wink Martindale is going to blitz Sam Howell all game. Washington's line is not great. Should disrupt the pass for Washington. The Giants aren't good. Washington's just not very good either. And in this rivalry in the division, 7 of the last 8 games have been one-score games. These teams just kind of play each other even. They have all along. The Giants have only failed to cover a 10-point spread in 1 of the last 12 games against Washington. So this is just too high of a line. Before the season, when they put out lines for every game for the whole year, the Giants were 1.5-point favorites in this game. Now they're 10-point underdogs. Look, I know the Giants are worse than we thought. Are they 11.5 points worse? Washington's worse than we thought too, so it's even more than that. This just doesn't make any sense to me. Washington has not covered this the entire season. They've only covered this 4 times the last 3 seasons combined. And then I got a good trend for you here. The Giants, of course, are losing by a lot. They got crushed by the Cowboys again. Guess who's not the Cowboys? The Commanders. Giants' margin of victory is now minus 14.8 for the season. That triggers a trend for me. When you are an underdog with a margin of victory minus 14 or worse from week 5 forward, 100-1, 52-1 against the spread, 66%. And if you're on the road as well, where we're obviously adding in some home field advantage, that jumps to 60, 22-1 against the spread, 73% for those underdogs. These teams that everybody thinks are terrible, including in the last calendar year, we've had 6 of those games, 3 road underdogs, 1 outright, as those huge underdogs, just like the Giants are here. Let's get ugly. Giants plus 10 at Commanders. So week 11 hot reads, Steelers, Browns under 38.5, and New York Football Giants plus 10 on the road. It's ugly. It's the hot read. Let's get it.
All right, we're back. Thank you, Brandon. Now, let's look at the rest of the slate on Sunday. First game we're going to start with is 49ers-Jaguars. So the 49ers win very easily, 34-3. The total does go under a 44.5, and the 49ers cover easily, as I said, as 3-point favorites. Evan, this is I've seen this game before. The Steelers in week 1, the Cowboys in week 5, now the Jaguars. This is basically what the Niners are with Christian McCaffrey and fully healthy. And since getting McCaffrey, the Niners are 18-4 straight up and 15-7 against the spread. And I bring that up because 3 of those losses came in the previous 3 games.
Yeah, I want to be very clear about this because I feel like it makes for better podcasts. I was completely wrong with this game. I had the Jaguars plus 3.5. Yeah, I liked Jackson. Not even that. I like Jacksonville in the spot.
You weren't the only one.
Yeah, and the thing with it was rest. I didn't care about the losing streak on the other side. The thing I think I ignored, which I probably shouldn't have. Debo wasn't there for a lot of the losing streak. Now coming back definitely helps the offense.
Trent.
CMC didn't even need to score today. Obviously, that streak now broken in 17 games. For San Francisco to do everything they needed to do on offense. They scored 34 today after scoring 17 in 3 straight games after they had that humongous long 30-plus point streak that they were on. But, yeah, they humiliated Jacksonville. And the thing that's very frustrating, I don't want to put it all on Lawrence, but as soon as you look at Trevor and what they've done in Jacksonville and how good they've been, and you want to anoint the team and Peterson and especially Trevor, and then you see this, and this is what happens. It's very tough, but listen, you do get a Tennessee team at home next week. Yep. It's a good bounce back spot if you're scoring just 3 points. So we should get a different Jacksonville game there. And listen, when you lose the turnover battle and I want to make this very clear, lose the turnover battle 4-0, which Jacksonville did today against San Francisco. I looked this up. You only win 4.1% of games. You only cover 6% of games since 1990. So it just.
I feel like you didn't need to look that up, though. I feel like that was almost like a goes without. I'm not saying that it's not important to know that. I know, no, I get it. When but at the same time, when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because, and the one thing about this game too, and what made sense for me is why I felt like I saw this game already a few times already this year is that we saw it against Dallas, and we saw it even in Week 1 against Pittsburgh. Is that you take a couple 3-and-outs. You maybe throw an early interception before you know it, you're down 20. And that's what this Niners team is really designed to do, especially now getting Chase Young on the other side with Nick Bosa just terrorizing guys. And it's funny that you say that you're not sure if this should be on Lawrence, because I wrote that down too. I wasn't sure if this game was totally his fault because he did have 2 picks and a fumble. It was an awful game for him. But he was sacked 5 times. He was not protected at all. And I feel like Doug Peterson as a coach did not have his team prepped for this overwhelming pass rush that's coming. This isn't the first game of the year. We have seen this team on tape many times, what they do. And sometimes, obviously, tape is easier to dissect than what's happening on the field. But at the same time, you have to be knowing that they're going to come after you and they're going to be basically daring you to throw it over the top. And they didn't really do that today with Jacksonville. Most of their yards per attempt were pretty down. So, for me, I feel like as well the Jaguars, they were in the Niners territory twice. They pissed down their leg both times with those fumbles, the Lawrence fumble and then the Christian Kirk fumble, where I thought that could get them back in the game. But before we move to the next game, Evan, I wanted to ask you this. First, the Jags, I just mentioned about the Titans coming up. They also have the Texans coming up, but one thing I was going to say is the way their schedule is going. So they've got the Titans for the get right spot. So if they don't get right there, they got the Texans next on that docket. And then if they're still struggling in that spot, they've got the Bengals, Browns, and Ravens back to back to back. So it's not an easy way to close this year for the Jaguars. But what I wanted to ask you, Evan, is McCaffrey doesn't get the record. What did you think of Shanahan having McCaffrey go up for the record when they were up by 31 in the fourth quarter? It was 4 straight plays, too, where they tried to give it to him, and everybody knew the ball was going to McCaffrey.
Yeah, so 2 things on that. I'll take the first one, which is Jacksonville. From that point of view, I like the spot next week because it is 6.5, not 7. And teams after they score 3 points or less, 77, 51, and 4. Against the spread, 60% last 20 years. So it is a decent spot with Jacksonville, especially under that touchdown. From CMC, going back to the CMC point.
Fair play?
Like really, honestly, I had the under. So, and I was up about 7.5 points at that point. So a touchdown probably wouldn't have killed me. But I was pretty happy that they kept forcing it to a player that the defense knew who to cover.
It was so
and
obvious.
I think it did help. But listen, from a record-breaking point of view, from San Francisco's point of view, from Shanahan, I think from everybody, it made sense. Like don't have anything wrong with it. I think it's
weird. Like
fine.
Maybe it's just different sports too. All I think about is like with basketball, when a guy like fakes a shot to get a rebound to maybe get like a double-double or a triple-double or something like that to get like 10 rebounds or something.
But San Francisco had to have the ball. Like they had the ball. They had to get the ball down there. Like they got it in a position to give it to him 4 times. It was everything they did to get there they earned. It wasn't like, I don't know. That's the way I look at it.
No, and you're right. So again, I think that's what I just needed to know. I didn't know if I felt maybe that I was like being too harsh about it, or if I just needed to be told to lighten up. And I think that's what I'm basically being told. Just live a little. All right, let's move to Packers Steelers. Steelers win 23-19. The total does go over of 38.5. And the Steelers do cover. And that to me is the story here, because it is insane to me, Evan, that now the Steelers won another game outright where they are getting outgained offensively, because every game this year they have gotten outgained offensively, but they are 6-3 straight up in the standings. And I don't understand what's happening. Like how a guy like Kenny Pickett can throw for 126 yards and be 4 for 13 on third down and not really be in trouble of covering here. And to me, this whole game, Like, look, Steelers' run game was on point. Jalen Warren was the best player. He and Najee, they both scored. But I could talk about all the stats and how these teams do on third down like all we want. This whole game came down to that missed extra point by the Packers kicker in the first half. And as soon as it happened, I got a bunch of group texts being like, yep, that's going to be it. Because the Steelers were 3.5-point favorites. They missed that extra point. They'd only be down 3. And once they started trading field goals in the third quarter, you knew that extra point was going to probably swing the spread one way or another. So, for me, this game, it all came down to the fact that the Packers missed that extra point in the first half, and that was really the deciding factor on whether or not you're bet covered as a spread better.
Yeah, listen, once you know the spread and you know the number, and then you watch the game, and then you watch that kick, and then you can turn back and say to yourself, okay, sure, it was the kick. It was the extra point. It was definitely the extra point. That's what did it. I get it.
There's more to it than that. I know, but I just...
you mentioned it. Green Bay, 10 of 18 on 3rd and 4th down, and lost the game and didn't cover. More plays, more yards per play, more pass yards. Yeah, Pittsburgh did really well on the ground, but voodoo. It seems like there is listen, Pittsburgh's streak is going to continue. They're going to be over 500 unless something absolutely falls apart and happens. And listen, they're at Cleveland and at Cincinnati the next 2 weeks. So if they turn around and they're sitting at, what are they right now? 6-3. So they'd be 6-5.
6-3. Yeah.
Yes, but so if they're 6-5 after losing at Cleveland and at Cincinnati, it's not going to be a shock. But yeah, you mentioned it. Steelers are the first team to be outgained in each of their first 9 games and still have a winning record. And not only do they have a winning record, but they're 6-3. And the thing that's interesting is, and you can look this up, look at the recent run of Steelers in 1-score games. I believe they've 9-0, and I did some quick looking before we got on here. 9-0, last 9 1-score games, 11-1, 21-7 or so in their last 28. It just they've really, really done a good job. Now listen, point to whatever you want. I mean, I think pointing to Tomlin and coaching isn't the worst thing you could do, but it is interesting. And here's another one that you could point to coaching. Steelers 26-8-1 at home against the NFC under Tomlin. So we go back to that Lamar stat, right? Like you haven't seen a team, you're not, aware of it. It's not easy to play against or, prep against. It's good. So I don't know how Pittsburgh does it. I don't know how they figure it out, but
this was such a crusher too, Evan, for the luck rankings. Like, I'm a big believer in the luck rankings, but the Steelers, and again, they're going to remain at the top of the luck rankings as far as where we're at now because of being 6-3. They feel very fraudulent at 6-3 based on their offensive output. But the Packers, based on what has happened this year, they were close to the bottom, and there was a 25-place difference between the two. And Nick Giffen, who's our predictive analyst, and Sean Kerner and our whole predictive analytics team who comes up with this stuff, those were hitting at like 70% cover rate for the team that was the lower on the luck side. So the fact that this game came down to the extra point just shows that even the luck rankings cannot usurp what's going on with this Steelers voodoo, man. It's crazy right now of how they're able to just have a horseshoe up their ass a lot of the time. We talked about that Ravens game they won earlier this year, the Browns as well. Coming up against these AFC North teams, like I wouldn't feel great about betting the Steelers, but if they won, you wouldn't be thinking to yourself like, wow, what an upset. You would just be like, oh my God, here we go again.
I mean, listen, they're +4 in Cleveland next week. And my guess is it's going to be probably higher in Cincinnati. So you're getting over the 4. Mm-hmm. Would I be shocked if they went 0-2 and 2-0 against the spread? I mean, it's what Tomlin delivers.
For sure. All right, let's talk about another fun one from the afternoon slate. Lions-Chargers. Lions win 34-31. Highest total on the board this week at 48.5. Went over pretty easily. There was 44 points at halftime. So, Lions were 2.5-point favorites. They do cover as a field goal winner. And the Lions now, again, we talk about this all the time about Jared Goff indoors, outdoors, or even just home and away. Jared Goff indoors is now 19-7 against the spread in the last 2 years, and 30-14 against the spread overall in his career playing indoors. And we could talk about their schedule here coming up, but they've got a lot of games indoors coming for Detroit.
I mean, just looking at this game specifically, and you mentioned the indoors thing, I think it's about being comfortable for Goff. Like, he's played at SoFi before. I believe this is his 9th game now. He's 6-3 in this building. To me, a lot of what he does week to week is based off his comfortability, right?
Yeah.
So I think when you're betting Detroit, which I think gets tricky, we start talking about cold weather, playoffs, and all the games Detroit actually will need to win. Now, maybe a lot of it will go through Detroit's building, which would be nice for Goff and how that how the end of the season does for Detroit. But I think that's a worry. Now, just talking about today's game, this is a wild one. This one was crazy. Like, in terms of points and the back and forth, we didn't have consecutive scores by the same team within the same quarter the entire game. Like, the Chargers never led. And you would have said to yourself, how is that possible if you would have watched the game? Because it feels like they did. It was tied 4 times after 0-0. Just lots of insane game where I had the Lions in the action app, and I kept looking at my profile. And even though the game was tied almost the entire time, the Lions had small leads at times late, it was all green the entire time. So I don't know. It just felt like it knew what it was doing. Some crazy stats. Now, when you talk about it from a Chargers point of view, so frustrating, right? Like, these are the games they continue to figure out ways to lose. Herbert played really, really, really well, and it was just the Chargers defense allowed 200 yards on the ground from the Lions. Crazy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to point to, is that the Lions actually ran for 200 yards by halftime. And
wow.
It was insane. But the one thing that I found was really telling about where this Lions team is now compared to maybe even last year or the year before when Dan Campbell first got there is Dan Campbell is pushing the right buttons on 4th down and showing Brandon Staley how it's done, because they were 4 for 5 on 4th down today. One of them to seal the game. To me, that was the type of aggressive play calling that helps you stay ahead of this Chargers team, why they could never get the lead, because they wouldn't give the ball back to them in those spots where the Chargers would be comfortable. And that's why this Lions team, I think, is really interesting about where they might be able to go in the NFC, because we talk about this indoor-outdoor part. They only have one indoor or outdoor game for the rest of the year. It's week 14 in Chicago. Every other game, Vikings, they've got the Bears, Packers at home, then they're on the road to the Saints, and then the rest of their way is week 14 against Chicago outdoors, and the rest of them are all indoors. So right now you can look at Jared Goff's splits, indoors, outdoors. He's about 3-1 for touchdown interception ratio compared to 1-1 when he's playing outdoors or in colder weather. So this offense is clicking right now. Jahmyr Gibbs looked fantastic. David Montgomery is healthy again. They're going to start getting more guys back healthy. That's why when we were talking about this Lions or the Vikings team, if whether or not they could be able to come back here and maybe make a push, and then it's NFC North. I mean, they still have 2 games against Detroit, but I don't feel great them matching up together that they could keep up with their offense, especially indoors. And I was going to say, did you want to look at the Chargers schedule? But to be honest, I didn't even write anything down because I don't even think it matters. Because if you look at the teams and who they play and what they do play, it could be them playing the 49ers. They could probably stay in that game and cover. They could be playing the Cardinals. They could stay in that game and then lose. Like, so for me, this Chargers team, I don't really care what their schedule is. It's more of, do you want to invest your money in this team going forward in games that you know are all going to end really screwy, man?
I'll say this. Herbert in his career, 29-30 straight up now. And this is from Doug Clawson, who you can see Doug Clawson on Twitter, but I'm going to give him credit because it's just so perfectly Chargers. But in Herbert's 59 career starts, so 29-30, 1,502 points scored, 1,502 points allowed. Exactly even through 59 career starts. So That is exactly Chargers and everything Herbert, and that's what you're going to get week in and week out.
All right, Falcons, Cardinals. Falcons lose as 2.5-point favorites, and the over-under of 43.5 does go over. But Kyler Murray is back, Evan. Kyler Murray, to me, you wouldn't even have known he was gone. Obviously, he doesn't have as many weapons to play with, like DeAndre Hopkins, and James Conner was back today, so that was obviously helpful. But I mean, we saw those long scrambles, those little pitter-patter scrambles. So, that was exactly his playing style. The 35-yard passes down the field. Trey McBride looked incredible. But we saw even in the 2-minute drill that this team is just decimated offensively. Like, they don't really have a lot that they can lean on. I mean, if you had James Conner for a touchdown, I felt really bad for anybody who had either James Conner for a touchdown or in fantasy, because he did you dirty. He took a dive twice inside the 5-yard line instead of running it in. And he could have probably ran it in too. Like, it didn't look like anybody was in the way. And it wasn't like, where it was so close of a game that maybe, like, again, you've got Desmond Ridder coming in for Taylor Heineke. Like, what are you worried about? Are you really worried that you left 30 seconds for Desmond Ridder to get a field goal on you? Like, I just felt like James Conner could have probably ran that in. And that's all I was saying. I don't really want to give the Cardinals too much crap for how they won this game, because they probably shouldn't have won the game, but Kyler Murray, that's why he is the guy.
Yeah, so this was Arizona's first game this season as a public side, so congratulations. Now every
Welcome
team has
back.
gotten that role, so bettors liked Arizona today, and they came through. This game was just so frustrating to watch from both points of view. Like, from Atlanta's point of view, God, it felt like Arthur is just so lost on a daily basis on how to win games and what to do with his offense and when to give people carries. Like, you look at the box score, and Bijan got 22 carries today, 95 yards, everything went well. And you try to figure out, well, why? Why now? How this happened based off what you saw before. It's just completely confusing, right? And then Atlanta comes out, they win the first half, and then they lose the game. It's just, it's just so they were 0-6-3 first half money line this season, only winless team. They come out, they play well, and then Kyler comes back and, pulls out their hearts at the end of this one. Listen, they've lost 3 straight, but they're also, I believe, a game out in the division. Can they win the NFC South and get a top 10 pick? Like, I don't know what the actual result is for Atlanta. Listen, before the season, I liked them. I picked them to sneak into the playoffs. I think I did a bad job at evaluating Ridder. I think I knew he wasn't great. I don't think I realized just how turnover prone and shaky he was. And I think Heineke gives you a better chance to win, but I think we saw today, man, they combined for 70 passing yards. It's just, I don't think either of them are the answer. I think they have a lot in their offense, and I'll finish it the way I started. I just think they're lost.
Well,
from a Falcons point of view, one stat for you. The NFC South, and this is just putrid, but actually kind of amazing. 44, now the whole division is 44, 75, and 2 against the spread. 37% versus any team outside the division over the last 3 years, including 9 and 21 against the spread this year. So that's the worst mark of any division. But
and you're speaking of that division,
crazy.
Yeah, and Carolina on the bye this week, now in pole position for first overall pick, and they don't even own the pick. Now it goes to the Bears. So, again, one of the things, like, it was a double whammy for the Panthers here, because I'm sure the Patriots, we'll talk about them in a little bit, but lots of teams kind of maybe gunning for that number 1 spot. And now the Bears are in pole position via proxy of the Panthers here. All right, Commanders, Seahawks. Seahawks win 29-26. Another 1-score game. Seahawks don't cover, though, as 6-point favorites. The over does hit of 44.5. Evan, Sam Howell and the Commanders, 5-1 against the spread on the road this year. So not bad. Like, they do kind of show up in these road spots here.
Yeah, 6.5, just too much. Right? It just ended up being a little bit too many points in this one. You mentioned Howell, 5-1 on the road against the spread. all 6 of those games, 1-score games. So
Mm-hmm.
he's sneaking, underneath the number, probably in a few of those. A fun one would be he's actually 1 road win away, which would come at this point on Thanksgiving in Dallas against the Cowboys. So he gets 1 more road cover. He'd be the most profitable Washington quarterback on the road in the last 20 years. So
Oh my God.
if you think about that and you think about all the quarterbacks that have come there at 6-1, that would give him the record. So pretty funny. But if you think about just today's game, Washington's got to feel great. They got to feel like they've got their guy. I mean, is the second in passing yards in the league. He had 3 touchdowns today. No interceptions.
But he got sacked 4 times today. They don't protect him. I think that's the problem. I think obviously, okay, so I'm with you.
But he's the quarterback.
I do feel
like the guy. I don't think they're worried about it's not Howell. Like, listen, we get it. He's been sacked 47 times this year, right?
I mean, he's only played like 8 games total.
Listen, when you're in a conversation with David Carr and sacks, it's not good. But it's not. But I think we understand he's looked good. Between McLaurin, Dotson, and Samuel, he's getting people the ball.
Yeah. Offensively, you're right. And I think that is a takeaway that we can at least agree on, that offensively, they can stay in these games and they have talent there. But the main takeaway I find is that this Commanders pass defense just is terrible. They're continuously plummeting in DVOA pass rankings. We've seen them just get torched repeatedly by wide receiver ones over and over again. Now, Metcalf didn't score today, but Lockett was able to score. There was a lot of times where their pass defense leaves a lot to be desired. They got 2 rookie corners. Emmanuel Forbes is one of them out there. They're going to improve on that front, but if they don't get offensive line help and secondary help, this is what we're going to see probably week in and week out with the Commanders. But from a Seahawks standpoint, I'm not really much to take away from that. I mean, they made plays to win. Obviously, just more play. It's a pretty simple explanation. They made more plays than they did. But for me, the Seahawks, I didn't feel like they did anything that really shocked me, like in this game. Kenneth Walker scored a touchdown. Like, again, there was no turnovers. There was nothing that they did where I was like, wow, like Geno really surprised me, or Sam Howell doing something that I was like, wow, they're really staying in this, other than maybe the touchdown near the end to get Diami Brown in. But other than that, this was pretty much how I thought it was going to play out, where the Seahawks would probably eke it out. All right, we got 3 games left, Evan. Let's wrap these up, and then we can get on with our Sunday here. Giants, Cowboys. Cowboys win very easily, 49-17. The total does go over of 39, and the Cowboys easily cover as 17.5-point favorites. And I mean, we talked about this last week. We knew this was going to happen with this big spread because there were no sweats in this one. Dak typically kicks the shit out of teams at home. We know this. And when you got Tommy DeVito on the other side, it makes it nearly unwatchable. So one of the notes too, Cowboys beat the Giants both games this year by a combined 89-17 margin. Those 17 points were scored just today. Titans, Buccaneers win 20-6. Total goes under. Bucks do cover as 2.5-point favorites, but the total, as I said, of 39 does go under. I mean, Will Levis, he just got smacked around really pretty much the whole game. There wasn't really a lot to take away from this one. Levis and the Titans, they just couldn't really do anything. It wasn't really much of a showing. It was a rookie quarterback playing on the road against an above-average defense, and this is what you see, and that there was just not much offense to take away from it. Last game, Evan, let's wrap it up here with the Germany Bowl. Colts, Patriots. Colts win 10-6. No, this isn't a baseball score. Colts win 10-6. And they do cover as 1.5-point favorites, and the total goes way under of 42.5 because this was the lowest scoring international game of all time, Evan. And this is the Pats' 3rd game of the year without an offensive touchdown. And now Mac Jones, as the quarterback with the Patriots, is 1-15 against the spread in his last 16 starts as a dog. So I'm going to end it on this, and I want to ask you, because we saw maybe some tanking shenanigans here where the Pats put in Bailey Zappi in the 2-minute drill. It's a 1-score game, so it felt like the ultimate FU to Mac Jones. Like, it reeked of tanking or just straight up contempt for Mac. So this is the worst straight up record through 10 games in the Bill Belichick era. The question is, going into the bye week, coming back in week 12, is this Mac Jones' last game as the Patriots starter.
I mean, it should be. I think this is probably the toughest one for us to predict, right? Every other time it was like, yeah, Mac will be back. Mac will be back.
Yeah.
I think we've also, because I honestly think we've been waiting for this international game plus this bye, which we thought there'd be a decision made post it. Listen, you're at the Giants coming off the bye, and then you're at home against the Chargers. I don't think there's much of a key game or a key situation or division game or something to circle. I mean, just doesn't matter at this point, right? Like,
No.
you're pretty much 20, I think you're 29th or 30th in the league in scoring. It's just really, really bad. And I think after today, because I know there was a lot of talk this morning about Kraft wanting the win and this one meaning a lot to him and it's being the Colts and all this stuff. Okay, guys, it's over. No games matter anymore. Nothing, like there is no matter in this season. Looking at the schedule, play Pittsburgh. They play Kansas City. Oh God, they play Kansas City at home on Monday Night Football. Jesus, the schedule. And then they end at Buffalo and versus the Jets. You just lose games. End this one. Let it go.
Well, the one thing that is important that happened is that they are now in second position to have a second overall pick right now in the upcoming NFL draft. So if they are looking to tank, this is the way to go about it. And that was pretty much a ultimate tank move. Even as bad as Mac Jones has looked, to bench him for a 2-minute drill in a 1-score game. So that was the ultimate white flag on the Bill Belichick era, and maybe even the Bill Belichick season at least of 2023. All right, that's it. Now let's check in with Patrick Everson with Vegas Insider to see how Sportsbook's fared in Las Vegas for Week 10. Patrick?
Hey, Gilles, it's good to be back on the Action Network podcast. A really interesting NFL Week 10 Sunday unfolded. Early in the day, before the games even kicked off, Christian Cipollini at BetMGM said, we really could use a Ravens outright loss, certainly could have used a Niners outright loss, a Bengals outright loss. Another odds maker said pretty much the same thing, said, we need either the Ravens to lose or the Bengals to lose, or we're going to have a really bad day. As it all works out in the early kickoffs, the Ravens and the Bengals both lose in the same fashion on final seconds field goals as home favorites. So it looked like this was just going to be a roll for sportsbooks today, particularly BetMGM, but certainly some others as well. Like they were just going to breeze through this NFL Week 10 Sunday and make their week. However, the way some of the later games fell really ate into what the books made. I talked with one odds maker tonight who said specifically the Sunday night game ended up being a problem, which isn't really unusual in Vegas now that, well, I guess I shouldn't say it's really unusual. The Raiders haven't been that good. But now they've won 2 in a row. There's some energy behind them. They took a lot of tickets and money at sportsbooks around Las Vegas today. And one odds maker said Raiders and under was our worst case scenario. He said we probably ended up around even for the day. He said we had a great early kick window, did okay to the middle kicks, but actually we're going to need the Jets tonight and did not get the Jets in the Sunday night game. Sunday night as I speak to you. And at BetMGM Nevada, it was pretty much the same story. I talked with Scott Shelton on this Sunday night about how they did to the games. And even before the Raiders and Jets kicked off, he said our day is going to come down to the night game, the Sunday night game between the Jets and Raiders. He said it was up and down all day. They traded mostly this morning, winning a big decision with the Texans, but losing a big decision on the 49ers, with the 49ers hammering the Jaguars. He said they won 3 of the 4 late games. They only lost to the Cowboys in the late window. And if the Jets had won tonight, which they certainly were in position to do, would have been another solid day for the bookmaker, certainly for BetMGM here in Nevada. But the Raiders got there, and so what Scott Shelton said is if the Raiders do get there, we will hope to break even. And then after the game, I followed up with Scott, and he said, we lost everything we won. He said, but you can't win every week. That wouldn't be gambling. I don't know that I can disagree with that. So a mixed bag, at least among the odds makers I talked with here in Vegas on this Saturday night, or Sunday night, I should say. But obviously those results early in the day helped. If they hadn't had the Ravens lose and the Bengals lose, the public would have had a really good day, which is fine with us. We want to see bettors win, but the public took it on the chin there and then rebounded, recouped some of that in the end, and probably everybody kind of broke even as it all worked out. As you look ahead to the Monday night game, this is from BetMGM as well, and I thought this was kind of interesting because I honestly don't think my Denver Broncos are that good. I'm a very pessimistic Broncos fan, and it's not like they've been world beaters for the last season and a half with Russell Wilson, and now this season with Sean Payton, the coach. But Monday night game at Buffalo, and this is from earlier Sunday from BetMGM, 57% of spread tickets, 54% of spread money on Denver on the road. And maybe it speaks a little bit to people seeing Denver having knocked off Kansas City a couple of weeks ago, got the upset there. But it also probably speaks a little bit to kind of the disarray that the Buffalo Bills are in, and people not necessarily trusting Buffalo. I'll be surprised if these numbers hang throughout the day Monday, because as we all know, a lot of the tickets and money, especially on these standalone games, are going to come in the last couple of hours. So maybe this changes a bit. But tickets and money on the Broncos on the spread, and also on the Broncos on the money line. The money line doesn't surprise me too much. People like to get in on that plus money, but that spread certainly surprises me a little bit. And then as you look ahead to next week, I talked to one Vegas oddsmaker on this Sunday night just about a few of the key games. No real big movers or anything that jump out, but you've got a couple of great games, mainly the Thursday night game, hopefully a great game between the Bengals and Ravens, who both are looking to bounce back, but really more so that Monday nighter. We're getting a Super Bowl rematch, and that between the Eagles and the Chiefs. And the oddsmaker opened Chiefs -2.5, and he said that will be a referendum on how much the market believes home field is worth, because generally they say, well, kind of the general rule, home field is worth 3 points. Well, the Chiefs are laying 2.5 here. And the oddsmaker noted the power rankings of these two teams couldn't be closer. They rate them very closely together, this oddsmaker does. And he said he wouldn't speculate on the need at this point, but he expects an outstanding amount of betting action on Eagles-Chiefs next Monday night to finish off the Week 11 slate. And if the favorites get it back together in Week 11, if the popular favorites get it together, there's probably going to be a ton of liability running likely to the Chiefs on Monday night, although the Eagles may take their share of money too, because the Eagles have certainly become a public team. So there you have it, a little look at how the weekend went in the NFL for Week 10, a little look ahead to Monday night and to Week 11. Thanks for having me, Gilles. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you for listening to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. Keep an eye out for all of our NFL Week 11 podcasts right here on the Action Network.